1900. Okay. We got a strong opponent here. Majid VS from Iran. Let's go. Now, our opponent might abort the game because, no, we're on our way. C6, Caro-Kann. So I flip-flopped quite a bit on what I was going to recommend against the Caro-Kann. Of course, the move is d4. I flip-flopped quite a bit on what I was going to recommend in the Caro-Kann as my official recommendation. My candidates were to recommend the exchange Caro, but I thought that was a little bit boring. And the repertoire that I'm recommending is very tactical. It's for players who don't mind sharp games, who don't mind learning some theory, and who want to challenge their opponent in every opening. And there's really only one line in the Caro that suits those purposes. I have played it before in the speedrun, and I will preface it by saying that I myself haven't reviewed my own fantasy files in a while, so I might be a little bit rusty. I might mess something up, but that's okay. We'll learn together. And this is the move F3 called the fantasy variation. It was popularized in the early 2000s by Alexander Morozevich, which should be a name that is familiar to you if you've spent some time in the chess world. He doesn't play much anymore, but at one point, I think he was number 2 or number 3 in the world. He was high 2700s, one of the most creative players to have ever lived. And you should check out his games. I mean, no matter what your style is, you should look at Morozevich games. He was unbelievable. He never became world champion, but, you know, just the Mikhail Tal school, really. Mikhail Tal is his idol. He's still alive. Doesn't play much anymore. Mostly just plays blitz tournaments nowadays, and he's declined quite a bit as he's gotten older. But Morozevich popularized the fantasy, which was not taken seriously at the time. I mean, people were laughing at this move because to play F3 this early against a sound opening like the Caro seems to violate a lot of principles. But if you look at it very concretely, you begin to realize that it's actually not such a risky line. It's not as risky as the King's Gambit, for example. It's in a completely different category. E6 is considered to be Black's most reputable response nowadays. So our opponent demonstrating some knowledge of theory, and we essentially play this like a French. The point of the move e6, first and foremost, is to create a threat. What is Black threatening? Well, Black is threatening, of course, D, E, F, E, and Queen H4 check. So you might say, oh, let's go G3. No. You cannot afford to make any more kingside pawn moves. You need to defend while developing. And to defend while developing, we play the move Knight B1 to C3. The point is to reinforce the E4 pawn, and consequently to take the sting out of the move Queen H4, which now meets with G3. Of course, you might say, well, aren't we allowing Bishop B4? Just like in the win-hour French, which this line resembles, we do allow Bishop B4, and that is indeed Black's main move. The two main moves are Bishop B4, and close second is Knight F6, just like in the French, and Bishop B4 is our opponent's choice. So here, White has a bunch of different continuations. And I've analyzed a couple. I'm actually trying to remember my analysis right now. I know for a fact that the most popular move here is Bishop to D3. Bishop to D3. Just a normal developing move, and you have this compact setup, Bishop D3, Knight E2. But I seem to remember that I like the move A3 here. Give me a second just to try to remember my own file here. A3 takes D. It's a pawn sacrifice. You know what? Let's risk it. I'm going to go A3. We're going to go A3. And A3, on the surface, should make sense to you, right? It's a move that forces the bishop to decide where it's going. Now, when you look at it more closely, it should strike you as a blunder. We're blundering bishop takes C3, which our opponent confidently plays, and D takes D4. Isn't that the whole idea of the move E6? Well, what you should realize is that Black has given up his dark squared bishop. And if you look carefully at Black's position squares, you should realize that Black has a lot of dark square weaknesses, right? There's D6 and E7, and Black's position is kind of riddled with dark square weaknesses. But right now, we're far removed from that conversation. We need to defend against Queen H4 check. And here there is a computer move. I admit that this is a computer move. This is virtually impossible to come up with on your own. But once the move is played, it begins to make sense. So it's not a bishop move. It's actually a knight move, and that narrows it down to two. Well, Knight E2 runs into E takes F3. That looks ugly. It's not H4. We need to develop our pieces. We must develop our pieces. The move is, in fact, Knight to H3. And as a developing move, it should make sense. We are developing a piece. We're getting closer to castling kingside. We're also, Queen H4 check in this particular situation is not dangerous because we just have g3. But the actual purpose of knight h3 is to prepare f takes e4. That's the real reason we play this move. We're now threatening to recapture the pawn because queen h4 is then going to be met with knight h3 to f2, protecting the e4 pawn. So that's the specific reason we play knight h3 and not a bishop. Our opponent continues to play correctly. Queen a5 is the theory move. And now, if I remember correctly, we must defend this pawn, and we have to do it very, very carefully. So in the fantasy, you do make a bunch of moves sometimes that are not positional in the sense that they don't necessarily make sense from a developmental standpoint, but we make them out of necessity. Queen d2 is awkward. Queen d2 is awkward. It just doesn't look great. We still have to continue developing our pieces. So you come up with the idea of bishop to d2, but bishop to d2 runs into the very nasty move e3, deflecting the bishop, and then black drives in and takes c3 with check and kind of forces you to move the king away. That's awkward. We play bishop to b2. Now, is the bishop currently bad on b2? No question about it. But later on, we can play c4 and d5. So the bishop, to use the terminology I've introduced in the previous speedrun, has a lot of potential energy, right? It may look terrible now, but if we push the c-pawn away, it starts looking not quite so terrible. Okay, so now if I remember correctly, we are supposed to take on e4. Yeah, our opponent is making all the right moves. He's going down my opening file, and this is already a very uncommon line. So I'm very impressed with our opponent's theoretical knowledge thus far. And actually, wait a second, let me think. I think the move is f takes e4, but then black in response has the move e5. So I'm trying to remember what the crux of the line is there. It also could be knight f2. No, I'm pretty sure we're supposed to now take the pawn. And black usually responds here with e5. And very impressive demonstration of opening knowledge by our opponent. Going down the principled line and then taking on e4. So I kind of maybe jinxed him. This move, I think, is dubious. So it's important here not to get overwhelmed by what's going on, because there's a lot going on. But if you break down the position into its component parts, the moves are actually quite natural from this point on. So first observation is that knight takes c3 is not a threat. It's not a threat because in response we can play queen to d2. Attacking the knight, pinning the knight, and winning the knight, because the queen on a5 is unprotected. That tells us we don't need to make a move that specifically protects c3. Well, the next top priority is to make a developing move. Once I frame it like that, the move should be very obvious too, and it's bishop f1 to d3, attacking the knight, encouraging it to take on c3, and preparing to castle kingside. So the move is bishop d3, and already white has quite an initiative here. So again, knight c3, queen d2 wins. Notice that e5 is protected. Our opponent drops the knight back to f6. Well, we continue our development, which means we need to castle. And castling doesn't just get the king to safety. That's not the only purpose of that move. Actually, the main purpose of that move is it puts the rook on the semi-open f-file, and that's one of the appeals of playing the fantasy variation. You often get this open f-file that you can attack on, and things get really exciting really fast. Our opponent, I think, is unaware of the danger that awaits him. He goes for a very kind of slow move, b6, preparing probably to fianchetto or maybe play bishop a6, but we are just a couple of moves away from smashing things open on the king side. We just need to figure out in what order to do it. And it's important not to get too excited. You still need to play based on sound principles here. So the move that occurs to me first, and this is ultimately, I think, the move we are going to play. What did I say about this bishop? Well, this bishop is not very good as it currently sits. So it would make sense, I think, to invest a tempo, and push c4. And push c4 in order to be able to then play d5 and fully open up the bishop. And if black continues to play without developing, then we are going to play d5 automatically. Because imagine we get c4, d5 in and black takes it. We can actually just take the knight and take again and have massive pressure on the f7 pawn. So as an alternative, the move queen f3 looks very nice. I know some of you proposed. It's just a good move in general. Maybe sliding the queen over to g3 and hitting g7. In the same vein, you could try queen e1. And queen e1 has the advantage of potentially lifting the queen up to h4. So I really, really like queen e1 here, actually. It's a very mature move. But I think we're going to play on theme, and we're going to go c4. And c4 definitely is irresistible to me. And then on the next move, well, we can't really play queen e1 anymore because now that invites a queen trade, but we can definitely go queen f3. We can definitely go queen f3. The funny thing is the moment I played that move, I'm regretting a little bit not going queen e1, but in these very promising positions, you often have multiple viable attacking options. But knight bd7, okay. So this move connects the knights and takes the sting out of d5. d5 no longer looks impressive to me because then black just plays cd5 and bishop f6, knight f6, the attack fizzles out. So I think the time has come for us now to invite the queen into the attack. Let's bring the queen into the attack. Let's get the lady involved. And let's go queen f3. Natural play. Now, am I worried at all about black castling queenside? A bit, but the queenside seems to be such a vulnerable area of the board that I think we'll figure it out. If black castles queenside, we will figure out how to get the king, how to hunt the king down on that side of the board as well. So again, what was the purpose of queen f3? Well, it wasn't just to hit the pawn. The queen is aiming for a particular destination, and that destination is g3. g3 is a super, super nice square across a lot of fantasy lines because it hits g7. It's just not nicely clustered on the king side. It's out of the way of the other pieces, right? When it was sitting on f3, it's kind of in the way of the rook. Here, it's out of the way of the rook. It's threatening to take on g7, and it's inviting black to make one of several very weakening moves. First of all, I would love to see short castle. That probably loses on the spot. The move that a grandmaster, I think, would play here with black is long castle, actually giving up g7. Not an easy thing to do. Our opponent plays it. Okay. So we'll get to the other moves later then. And you know what? I have had dinner today, but I don't see a compelling reason. I don't see a compelling reason that we can't take this pawn. And this is, I think, something that a lot of players have a hard time with. When they get into quote-unquote attack mode, they somehow forget that material exists and is an important concept. And is an important concept even when you're attacking, right? When you're attacking doesn't mean you can't take stuff if it's free. Now, queen takes g7 certainly looks very scary. Well, why does it look scary? It looks scary because it opens up the g file. So we need to calculate. Queen takes f6, rook h to g8, but the queen weasels out through f7 and it takes another pawn along with it. Now, what can black try in that position? Who can tell me a move that black can try, which intensifies the attack on the g2 pawn? And this move might look very, very scary to you if you're trying to visualize. It's the move c5, right? Two can play at that game. But c5 isn't as scary as it looks because first of all, we can simply defend the g2 pawn. We can bring the knight out to f4 where it protects g2. We could even play the move d5, closing down the diagonal. So that looks interesting. Although the position there becomes very complicated because after d5, black can actually play the crazy e takes d5. And if we take the knight on f6, black can continue chomping. And then he threatens a bunch of different things. So I think we should take on g7. My intuition tells me that this is a bluff and that we will figure out a way to counteract the attack on g2. Let's go for it. Fingers crossed. Say your prayers. We're taking the pawn. And I'm not sure. It's not like I've analyzed this before and I'm playing it up for the crowd. I truly might look like a complete fool here. Clearly, our opponent knows exactly what to do because he responds instantly with rook g8. He might also not be taking us seriously because we're 1400. But we're already up a pawn, which is a good thing. We're attacking and we're up a pawn. Oh, rook e8. That one I didn't see. That one I didn't see. But it doesn't actually threaten anything, does it? Ooh, but this is an incredibly high-level idea. This is an incredibly high-level idea. Because if rook takes f6, which I thought we would play, black plays rook g to f8. And forces our queen away because the knight defends the rook. We can't really take the rook. We can take the rook, but we only have a queen and a piece. I didn't see that move at all. Rook d8, very quiet. What a move. Okay, well, that means we need to just play with our queen on f7. And we need to figure out a move. Well, bishop takes h7 is a move. But I don't know. Taking that pawn, rook f8, queen g7. Maybe, actually. Maybe we can take h7. Okay, let's think. I actually have to think here. I have an interesting idea, but it's a very high-level move. It's a very high-level move. So my worry here is that black is going to go c5. That's basically going to be his next move. So we need to do something prophylactically to defend the pawn on g2. And I had two ideas. I had the idea of going c5 ourselves to bury the bishop under a pile of rubble. That's an interesting thought, c5. Another idea is to play knight f4 here to defend g2. And a third idea is to play rook to f2. And rook f2 has the aim of, well, it has the aim of defending g2 with the rook. I like c5 a lot. Yeah, I like c5 as well. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? But there's some crazy lines where we lose the queen. I can't believe this. Just a moment. This is bishop takes h7 actually might not be such a bad idea here. Yeah. Let's give this a shot. While we're at it, we'll take another pawn. Now, the point of this move has nothing to do with winning a pawn. The purpose of this move could not be further removed from... I mean, it's nice that we take a pawn, and we're now up 2 pawns, so unless our opponent checkmates us, we're probably going to win the game. Okay, this I don't understand at all. He gives us an easy pass with the queen. I guess he wants c5. But c5, we go rook f2. I mean, why is that like the scariest thing in the world, you know? I don't know about bishop takes knight takes h7. He played that very quickly. Okay, c5 was the idea. Now, we definitely don't want to go g3. That's a ridiculously weakening move. At this point, I don't want to go knight f4 because after the pawn on d4 is eliminated, black's e-pawn could push up to e5 and attack the knight. So, unless I'm missing something catastrophic, which is entirely possible given seemingly what seems to be our opponent's ironclad confidence in the attack, let's go rook f2. Catastrophe. This is catastrophe. And queen e1 not possible. We have the other rook defending. So unless I've misjudged this and there's some move here, I think we're fine. Now, fine in air quotes. Like, their attack is still very strong. And when I say that there's nothing, obviously black has a long-term attack too. It's not like if we don't get checkmated in 2 moves, we're safe. We're actually not safe, especially the way our opponent is playing. Knight f6. I saw that move, but I thought we could drop the queen back to d3. We definitely cannot take, because then the rook takes on g2, and I'm going to trust that our opponent has calculated that. So we need to move our queen, and we should probably move it closer to our king. So queen h4 comes to mind, but then it's a little bit offsides. I would be quite worried that the queen would be on the side of the board. I want it to be directly contributing to the defensive effort. So let's bring it all the way back to d3, and finally our queen is now safe. Yeah, very sneaky opponent. Knight e4 looks scary, but again, rook e2, and where exactly is the killer blow? You know, I don't see it. Yeah, probably our opponent is going to play cd. We're going to recapture, I think, with our bishop. And probably our opponent is going to play something like e5, would be my guess. So we take with the bishop and not with the queen, because the queen on d3 is well placed. I don't want it to re-enter the game like this and then walk into e5 and have to move again. The queen is a big liability when you're defending, because the queen can be used as fodder for a well-timed tactic. So you want to keep the queen as safe as possible, not just your king. Okay, obviously the move is rook e2. I'm speeding up a little bit here. We have to stay with the rook on the second rank. The reason is if we go anywhere else, there was rook takes g2 and knight c5. Discovery winning the queen. So we're starting to consolidate, I think, and we're actually forcing our opponent to spend a little bit longer. Unless I'm missing, again, some crazy idea here. And there is a crazy move. I realize that black can play e5 here. And after the bishop drops back to b2, black has a very nasty check on c5. And if our king is forced to h1, well, then it walks into the diagonal. And there's also the possibility of a smothered mate, potentially. Our knight on h3 is what stands between us and smothered mate. So not a ton of good news in this position, I think, if our opponent handles this like tall. Yeah. So what's funny is if we end up losing, our opponent probably will not waver in his belief that it was a 1400 after all. Our opponent will be, yep, beat a 1400. Just another day at the office. But I have an idea. to defend against what I just said, what I just mentioned. Yeah, this would be the ultimate irony. So what's interesting, I'll make a little detour as our opponent is thinking, is that I remember a game. This was a tragic experience that I had. I've never shared this before. So I had a game. I was 1,200 or 1,300. This is one of my first ever rated games. Well, maybe I'd had 15 games before this one. It was my first ever game at the Mechanics Institute Chess Club in San Francisco, which is the oldest chess club, one of the oldest chess clubs in the country. It's my childhood chess club in San Francisco. Now at those chess clubs, usually in Charlotte, there's the same thing. There's a tournament, a weekly tournament. It was called Tuesday Night Marathon in San Francisco. In Charlotte, it's Tuesday Night Action. There would be a club game every Tuesday at 6:30. It would be USCF rated. So I played in those tournaments, in those Tuesday night marathons, for maybe like 11, 12 years. I would go to the Mechanics every single Tuesday. Now, my first ever game against the Mechanics, I came, my dad told me the pairing, I sat down. He didn't tell me the rating of the opponent, so I had no idea if this guy's 800 or 1,800. And at that point, like in my career, I was very affected by ratings. So I played an absolutely brilliant game, like 2,200 level, wipe him off the board. And my rating at the time is like 1,000. Then toward the end of the game, I get up and I look at the pairing. I realize the pairings were just on the wall, and I get up and look at them. And my opponent is 1,900. I see that my opponent is 1,900, and I almost peed myself. Like, I could not believe I was beating a 1,900 because my highest rated win at the time was maybe 1,200. And what do you think happened? I did something to the bed. 5 moves later, I'd blundered. It was equal again, and I ended up losing the game. And it was unbelievably painful, but the effect of knowing your opponent's rating, Magnus was mentioning this in the SEC interview, is immense. Like, your play actually changes, and sometimes when you don't know who you're playing, maybe our opponent is playing his actual best strength because he's confident. So remember that everyone's human. Ratings are completely relative. I feel like a 1,200 a lot of the time, and don't let your opponent's rating dictate what you do. Like, that's a very sad way to play. You should just play the same way against anybody, which is why we're building good habits in the speedrun. I'm doing maybe overkill against lower rateds in my technique and stuff and my explanations. But if you build those good foundations, you'll have the foundation to beat higher rateds later on in your chess career. In the meantime, our opponent has gone into like very deep tank. So in about 3-4 minutes, we'll start thinking about how to exploit our opponent's time pressure. But for now, he still has plenty of time. Yeah, and Nifa makes a great point. Your rating is not just your playing strength, but also your psychological strength. Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of players who just like go into shutdown mode the moment they play someone who's 300 points higher rated. And my students have struggled with this, and this is something I struggle to teach, which is this like mentality. At some point, you play an opponent 300, 400 points higher rated, and you just think you're going to lose. And when you get into that, like, there's no way I'm winning this game mindset, you are actually going to lose every single game against higher rateds. There's a middle ground between coming in and saying, I'm going to beat everybody, this guy sucks, and then saying, I'm going to lose because he's X points higher rated than me. Okay, our opponent's still thinking. He's down to 7.5 minutes. That's half his time. This is like a bit of a downside of the 15 plus 10 speedrun, is sometimes we just get into these like 8-minute things. But hopefully you've enjoyed the story. Okay, we can get back to the position in sort of leisurely fashion. We have a threat. White has a threat in this position. What is White's threat? Who can tell me? What is White's threat? He might also have bad connection. That's totally possible. Might have come up with a move like eight minutes ago. Yeah, rook takes c4, right? Getting 2 pieces for a rook. And essentially, if we can eliminate the bishop, we eliminate the attack. So the threat is rook takes c4. Black has different categories of moves. Black can create a counter threat, which is why I was worried about the move e5. Counter-threatening the bishop. So after e5, if we still play rook e4, Black will take the rook and then take the bishop and be up in exchange. Now that's a complicated line. e5, rook e4, bishop e4, queen e4, ed. We have a check on a8, but the king drops up to c7 and there are no further checks. No further checks, Your Honor. So after e5, we have to move the bishop. We have 2 diagonals where we can move it. We can move it back to b2. That's what I was discussing. The problem with moving it back to e3 is that black has this weird quiet move, rook to d8. And suddenly the queen feels very, very uncomfortable. There's only one square, queen d3 to b3. And I don't know, the queen on b3, it walks into knight to d2. And then from d2, the knight can jump back to f3 with check and maybe even back to h4 and attack g2. So black gets a lot of things going there. That's why after e5, I wanted to go bishop b2, so that after rook d8, what additional square does the white queen have? It has the e3 square. It sits on e3. That's a very nice square. It's invulnerable, and it's preventing queen c5. So e5, I think, is not that dangerous. Black can also move the knight away, but that definitely isn't dangerous. Like knight d6, we'll just play rook he. No, rook he1 is bad. Knight d6, rook he1 is bad because there's this rook takes g2 move. Queen makes contact with the rook, deflection. So knight d6, what are we going to do? Well, we should try to find some sort of general improving move. I really like the look of c5 in that position, weirdly enough. I like the look of c5. Because after bc and bishop e5, it shuts down the queen's ability to access the fifth rank. And that's really the only way that black's queen is joining the attack, is through the fifth rank. So c5 looks really interesting in response to knight d6. Queen f5, of course, is a move. And finally, our opponent plays e5. So we can respond very quickly because we literally just spent 7 minutes talking about this move. I genuinely think our opponent was thinking. I think there was a chance he was just like legit thinking about a move. Rook d8. This is exactly what we predicted. The queen now has the very nice e3 square. Okay, and our opponent is back to the pace that we're used to. And he was attacked by a pan-3, and that is perhaps the likeliest theory. So again, we have a bit of an issue where it's hard for white to make progress here. And knight d2, I was kind of expecting that move. So first thing I see is that the queen and the knight are aligned on the same diagonal, so he's walked into bishop c3. But amazingly, after bishop c3, there's this move, knight takes c4. Our opponent is playing like a genius. Knight takes c4. And if we take his queen, he takes our queen. And if we recapture, g2 falls with check, and then the bishop can be captured. So this might just be a brilliant move. We can't play queen takes e5 because of knight f3 check. Oh my gosh. We can play queen c3. But then there's queen c5 check. Let's think. What else can we do? No, I don't want to sack the exchange because then white gets... No, that's losing. No, sacking the exchange is not an option here. Knight g5 comes to mind as an interesting way to block the g file. Knight g5, interesting. Knight takes c4. Queen h3 check. But then king b8, and our bishop hangs, our knight hangs. Jesus. Bishop c3, queen c5 check. Unbelievable. Okay. We're in trouble. No, he's outplaying me completely. I'm not playing this up. Knight d2 is maybe a move I would find in a classical game, but unlikely. So let's continue thinking. Maybe it's Alireza. Okay, I need to think. Like, legit think. Let me find something tricky here. Now, bishop c3 we talked about, knight c4. Thinking. And I can always speed up. That's not really a big worry. Okay, king h1 comes to mind also. King h1, curl up into a ball, basically. King h1, rook g1. But at this... No, but also doesn't work. Yeah, I underestimated the attack. If I say something, I'll be in big trouble. Let's go king h1. I feel like this prolongs the game the most and increases the chance of a mistake. We'll check with the engine afterward, but I'm out of my league against this guy. Just legit out of my league. Here or queen b3? Which move do we play? Everything is losing. Queen b3. I think we have to go here. And it's far from obvious how black should proceed. It's far from obvious how black should proceed here. And it's far from obvious that we're dead lost. I mean, the position remains very unclear, but I can sense that the game is not going in our direction. And I'm pretty pessimistic. But we had a game like this a couple days ago, and we managed to pull it out. So queen d5 is what I'm actually hoping for. Most people, I think, in the 1900 range would play queen d5. They wouldn't even think about trading. Queen d5, we play rook g1. And that was the point of king h1. This is a strong defensive move. Because we walk into the pin, looks absurd, but we're just making space for the rook to jump into g1. This is like a desperation strategy. I'm curled up into a ball, and I can barely move. But curling up into a ball can be like a hard strategy to break down, especially in a blitz game. So, okay, now there's no way that's the move. Okay, we take it. I don't even understand. I mean, there is the idea of taking. No, but then queen c4. What is this? Is this a blunder? Okay, he takes and then he thinks. That's an interesting strategy. Oh my god, no, it works. Okay, this smells. Wait a second. This smells very, very strange. Rook g1, rook takes g2, rook takes g2, and rook g8 at the end, and I can't defend my own rook. I'm stunned by this play. I'm stunned by this play. No, this is absurd. Yeah, and he thought on queen d5. I'm sorry. We will check, and I will always apply the same routine. I never accuse, almost period, but not, like, first we look at the engine. It's entirely possible I just freaking got outplayed. I've played 360 speedrun games. Eventually, I'm going to lose a game. And, like, this might be the game that I just didn't play well enough to beat, this 1900 in. But what is so suspicious to me is that he took 8 minutes before c5, before e5, and then he rattled off one of the most insane sequences I've ever seen. So, and here the problem is if I play rook g1, the bishop hangs. Whereas if I play bishop c3, he has knight e3. Like every move, he has some crazy line. And that's always the feeling you get, that you're playing somebody who's so out of your league that it's like no matter what you do, he's had everything thought out for ages. Julius Caesar, when Julius Caesar was stabbed, he already saw. And what is this? Not taking the bishop. He doesn't take the bishop. He plays rook g, which is even better, of course, because rook g2, and queen d1 is coming to a theater near me. All right, desperation. Bishop d4. One last trap. Queen d4, rook g5. So this also totally might be a smurf. And if it's a GM, then I am humbled. This would still be very strong play for a GM. I'm in Zugzwang. I just have to move my pawn. And he goes knight e3 and wins. Okay. He takes first. Interesting. I guess he wants to... Okay, so you see, that was totally a human move. At last, I think I'm playing him. But we will check. I'm still going to try to wait. This is not an obvious win. Now, the most hilarious thing of all time is going to be if I win this game or if I draw this game. So just give me a second. If I draw this game, this is going to be the greatest moment in the speedrun ever, but I'm not going to because he has knight f5. So let's think. Can I go the other way? No, crap. I lose my pawn. That's the problem. Wait. I have an idea, though. No, I don't. Let's go here. Try to confuse him. Now, this is another trap, and he, of course, sees d3. And will he see d2? That's the critical move. d2 and knight g3 wins the pawn. No, this guy is an absolute magician. Absolute magician. Let's see how he wins this. Yeah, this is the strongest speedrun opponent of all time. And if you watch him blunder his knight. Okay, we're just waiting. Now this is winnable by getting the pawn to a3 and then knocking the king out. Very strange technique so far. He's inching his pawn along, but slowly. But let's see if he knows not to bring the pawn to a2. That would be a mistake. Yeah, he's not playing a4. Wow, king a4. Okay, wait a second. He's making this very interesting. C4. I'm trying to set traps with my bear king. Okay. Oh, yeah, he got me there. I guess I should have gone king back to b2. Wait, here? This can be a draw if he's not careful. Oh my gosh. No, it's winning. It's winning because of knight c3. If it was black to move here, if it was white to move again, it would have been a draw. If it was my move here, it's a theoretical draw. So he wins actually by the skin of his teeth. Wait, he doesn't see it. Oh my gosh. No, it's not a draw. What am I saying? The pawn has to be on a2. No. The pawn has to be on a2. I knew I was confusing it. He can move his king. Yeah, this is winning. Sorry. If the pawn is on a2, then it's a draw. I'll show you what I mean after the game. I was thinking wishfully. God, this guy's taking forever to win. And watch him stalemate me. That would be the... I feel like he's going to stalemate me. Just get that good feeling. Mate in one. Okay, he finds it. Okay, yeah, that was crazy. Let's check the game. We're getting some bad luck in this speedrun. Let me copy the game into chess space, as we usually do. But yeah, that endgame, the way he played in that endgame, it really did seem like he had... A change had been made in opponents from like move 1 to 40 and then 40 to 80. Yeah, and a lot of people who do cheat, they do this very primitive method where they cheat and then they play on their own to eliminate, to lower the accuracy. But that won't fool, the detection. So, okay. So a3 is a line. Yep, knight h3, that's the top move. So I wasn't misremembering. I was not misremembering. Queen a2 is the move. So you can see we're following the engine line. So this is a mistake, of course, and I knew that. Here, here, here. c4 is correct, and bd7 is correct. Here, here. We're playing like a frickin' engine. And of course, this was a mistake. It didn't change the evaluation too much. What is rook a1? I mean, it's not a very human move. Okay. Okay, so this was the second move. Okay, now it's the first move. Okay. Yep, it's the basically top along with queen d2. Takes, c5. Here. Mistake because of knight f6. Top move. And then, of course, cd is top. And knight e4 first, and then e5. And, of course, rook d8. Second move. Good enough. As long as it's followed up by knight d2, which it is. It's also the top move. And, of course, I blundered this. And bishop g2, naturally followed by queen d5, is the refutation. Rook g5, and of course, any normal human, they wouldn't take on b2 here. They'd play the top move, rook g8, and then ed. But then, of course, a 1900 wouldn't see that knight e3 wins the game on the spot. No, a 1900 would trade queens here. And then again start playing like an engine. Yeah, no, I mean, this to me is... pretty blatant, barring the fact that he's actually a GM. Even a GM, I think, would struggle to find knight d2 and stuff. So I'm definitely going to report him. Now, I need people who are watching like on YouTube to understand that I feel like this is a very sensitive topic. The concept like GMs, GMs just like bullying players and saying, oh, he's cheating. But I want to take the fact that I'm a GM out of the equation. I showed you why I'm suspicious, right? It was literally, he made one mistake in the opening, and then he makes 25 top engine moves in a row. And I got the feeling that I was just getting blown out of the water. And then he makes a move nobody would ever play, and then spends like 50 moves winning the endgame. So a lot of signs pointing one way. And only on the basis of that am I going to report him. Extremely suspicious play, starting move 13, 25 or so top engine moves, insane ideas included, followed by clear play at a significantly lower level for the rest of the game. Yeah, I guess I'll block him as well. Yeah, So we have played confirmed cheaters a couple times, so we'll see what chess.com decides, and if they decide he didn't cheat, then I will take my words back, and I will accept the results. So like I feel like that's how to handle it. But let's actually look at the game, because I think my accuracy was not bad at all. I don't think I played a terrible game at all. I just made like 1 or 2 big mistakes in the critical tactical position. So as I was saying earlier, and we'll actually look in ChessBase because we again need to use the engine here. There's a lot of very complicated lines. Well, I appreciate people giving me the benefit of the doubt. So we'll skip right to this position. What I mentioned to you before about the fantasy, I'll give you an introduction to the fantasy some other time. I'll give you the overview, but this is a very specific kind of game. So we'll go straight into this line. So the move knight f6 here, if you're comfortable playing a knight c3 French, you can actually transpose into the French with e5 and f4. And this is the Steinitz French. You've just transposed directly into it. But white doesn't have to play e5. White can also play, I think the engine likes the move bishop d3. White has a bunch of these sidelines here that you can investigate. But realistically, the move e5 is topical. And for that reason, almost nobody, I mean, not a lot of people play knight f6. So bishop b4, a3. If bishop a5, then I think the move I decided on was bishop d3. This is a pawn sacrifice, technically, but you get absolutely like massive development here with knight f3, and black's position just kind of falls apart here. If black takes another pawn, then you have 3 pieces developed. Black has 0, and I mean, this position just sucks. Queen e2, then bishop b4 you can play. Bishop can be stuck onto d6. I mean, it's just a massive initiative for white. Yeah, and if the queen moves away, the engine likes to solidify the center with e5, also open up the bishop, setting up potential Greek gift sacrifices. So this line is very promising. GMs usually go like knight e7 here, but then white can go knight e2, and you get this very like compact development. And black's position is slightly passive here. It's like solid for black, but I think it's more fun for white to play these types of positions. You can go bishop g5, you can go bishop e3, you can play on both sides of the board. I think you can bring your queen into the game, you can push the f pawn. It's like, I would suggest that if you want to play the fantasy well, you should analyze with the engine in a position like this for like 30, 45 minutes. Just like move pieces around, see what happens, try to understand the ideas. And that's ultimately like what you do to prepare yourself for middle games. So our opponent played the topical line, takes, knight h3, which I explained. Here, knight f6, fe, and now I was shocked that he didn't play e5, which is, again, a move I would expect a 1900 to play. And here the lines get pretty crazy. So white plays bishop d3, sacrificing the pawn on d4, and then moves the queen up to d2. The point of this move is to encourage black to play dc. You're trying to lure black into taking these pawns so that the dark squared bishop becomes the monster that it's supposed to be. And again, it's one of those situations where we've sacked a pawn, but we have a big initiative. Queen c7, you can jump with the knight. h6, e5, counterattacking black's knight. And then white's knight can slink back to e4. And look at this line. Castle's knight f6 check. Just sick lines all over the fantasy. gf, queen h6 with unstoppable checkmate, essentially. If the king moves away, then we just take the knight. We eliminate black's only strong piece. And look at your bishops, look at your rook. This is like crushing. So some cool lines here. But for that reason, black is supposed to eliminate the knight. And the engine does tell black to take. And apparently black is okay here. Another case where, like, holy smokes, I would be terrified to play this position with black. But apparently the best that white can do is some sort of repetition. But realistically, I would just castle here and enjoy my life with white. 2 bishops, get the rook into the game. Black is, again, supposed to play like an engine here. I'm sure our opponent would navigate this flawlessly. Yeah, and more evidence seems to be coming out. He was 1100 3 months ago. Yeah, okay. I think we'll leave it to chess.com. So this line, from a practical perspective, is incredibly promising. Our opponent plays knight e4, allowing this absolutely massive development. And after b6, we correctly were deciding between these two moves, and the engine says to play them interchangeably. So c4 and queen f3. And even queen g3 is correct. So we get to the next critical moment, which is here. Now, I think most people in the 1900 range would be tempted to play a move like g6, which essentially loses after d5. If black castles kingside, then again, I was planning d5, but apparently that's not the best move because of e5. This closes down the diagonal. So according to the engine, oh, bishop c3 is sexy. Oh, that is quite the move. Takes, we have bishop h7. If the queen skips over to the other side of the board, we lift our rook up to h4, and then we trap it. Look at these lines. Queen a4, rook f6, knight f6, and d5. And the difference between this d5 and that d5 is that black e5 is futile because of bishop e5. e5 is futile. So black has to move the knight away, and then the attack. Queen h3, wow. Oh my god, queen h6. God, when you analyze with the engine, you just find these like disgusting ideas all the time. And it becomes addicting. Just crazy attacking concept here. But look at this attack. Look at black's position. Now, you shouldn't have any trouble understanding that white is winning here. That's how intuition works, right? You're not calculating. You're just looking at the position saying, black's got nothing in the game. It's over. And if king h8, you can play, takes, queen h4, f5, check, get in there, and then just queen h6. Easy clap. So this is a pretty straightforward attacking line. In any case, castle short was not the way to go. So castle's queenside is a super high-level decision by our opponent to realize that you are giving away this very important pawn, and that's the only way to stay afloat. Now, look at the engine's recommendation here. Rook a to e1. It's just saying improve your position, don't commit to anything, and black has no good moves. So I was worried that black would go c5. But we can just plug the diagonal and jump into g5. And now you understand why the engine wanted us to put the rook on e1. Because now it can infiltrate to e7. So this is what engines do. They make this very mysterious move. And you're like, why here? Why e1? Why not d1? And it only reveals itself in response to some particular move, in this case c5. So let's say black plays rook g8. Now again we go knight g5. We try to induce rook f8, and we actually play bishop takes h7. And oh my god, look, bishop g6. No, that's why we eliminated the pawn. So that after knight e6 there was unstoppable checkmate on c7. b5, bishop c3. Queen b6, c5. Get off the diagonal. Get off the diagonal so we can play queen c7. I mean, come on. Yeah, it's fun to analyze with an engine when you got like a guide, you know, and I feel like I'm a good guide because I can spot the cool lines really fast. And if knight h7, you play knight h7, attacking the rook has to move, and black's construction just collapses here. Notice the rook on e1 is defended. So rook e1. What if black plays h6? Oh, now we take. And now if you go down the same line as... Well, black can't even play the same moves in the game. Okay, rook e8, queen f7, yeah. So this, with the rook on e1, none of black's ideas tend to work. Because of rook e6, So the reason the rook on e1 here is so important is because we will take the pawn, given the opportunity, and then we can meet c5 with d5, and we close the diagonal permanently. So it was necessary to throw in, but queen g7 is not a big mistake. So our opponent finds this move, another strange move that the computer only starts appreciating at a high depth. Or maybe not, it's the second best move. Queen d2 was best, and then rook e8. So similar type of idea. Because this keeps the queen confined, and it makes it very hard for white to find a move. So d5 is tempting, but there's this check on c5 and then cd. And if we take on f6, black plays dc, and there's a mate threat on g2, and the bishop is lost, and white collapses. So if we play rook f6, then rook gf8, another crazy idea, forcing the queen away, and then black takes the entire rook away. So we decided on bishop h7, which is a very panicky move. Very panicky move. It gives away a very important piece. According to the engine, just rook a e1 is best. Keep the tension. I panicked. And if c5, then d5. Takes. Yeah, just bishop f6 wins the piece. The rook's no longer on g8. So, yeah, rook a1 makes perfect sense. I decided to grab the other pawn. And after c5, already the situation is quite dire from a human standpoint. Okay, the engine move is crazy. d5, ed, and rook a, e1, putting the rook on pre because of the rook on g8 being hanging as well. But again, this rook e1, the engine loves putting the rook on e1 here. We played rook f2, knight f6, another crazy move. Takes here, and here is totally crushing. Also not like mate, but just a crushing attack. So this is a maneuver, but a lot of people would go knight e4 here. And after rook e2, the knight has to jump back. This would be very impulsive. Our opponent correctly takes first, and only now plays knight e4. And the difference is that black has this move e5. Bishop b2, and now rook d8, and knight d2 at the end, which is a very hard to understand move. But the point is it threatens the pawn, and it opens the diagonal for black's other pieces. It just creates too much tension in white's position, too much strain. So here are some of the lines that I calculated before deciding that we're lost. If queen c3, then check here, here, and at the end of this line, queen c6 check is winning because king f2, king g3 both run into the fork, and king g1, rook g8 is similarly crushing. So that's fails. Bishop c3 is what we started with. This is the reason most people would refute knight d2. But here there is knight takes c4, take, and now if we play rook e3, black plays rook g2 and ba, and this endgame is totally lost because just look at it. I mean, white's losing everything. The other rook's coming in. So according to the engine, the only chance would have just been to play g3 here. I didn't even think about this move. And it is losing. It is losing for white. Black has too much activity, too many squares. The attack persists into the endgame. So this is miserable. But the way I played it, it loses on the spot. But only to this bishop g2 idea. Crazy. And after queen d5, the point is that after rook g1, this is what I missed. Take, rook g8. No way to defend the rook with the queen. Somehow all the squares are taken away. Knight g5, rook g5. This is what it feels like to play an engine. Everything has been accounted for. So I desperately played knight g5 to get the queen over, which is a nice idea, but we're too tied up here. Everything is falling. Now, any human would take on b2, I feel. Just take the bishop, but our opponent continued putting pressure with rook g8. And okay, the rest is history. And then here, who doesn't play knight e3? Who takes here? Which, incidentally, it's very close to being a draw. If black plays, if we go here, I think the only way to win is basically to go knight f5 and knight g3. Black has to eliminate this pawn. And then at the very end, I was delusional. I apologize for that. What I was confusing this with, I think you'll forgive me, if the pawn is on a2, this is already a draw. This is a draw because the black king never gets out of the trap. And the reason it never gets out of the trap is if you had this exact position with white to move, right? If this position with white to move, black would be winning because the king can't go back to c1, and wherever it goes, black moves out and promotes. So something worth remembering that with like the right side to move, this is a draw. Black has zero progress to make. The knight cannot triangulate. The knight mathematically cannot lose tempi, and so it just goes between c1 and c2. We were very close to this. Like, our opponent got it very, very close, but realized that this is just winning easily by forcing the white king out of the shell or stepping back to b3 and playing a2 and knight c2. But it took him like 30 moves longer than it should have. So yeah, amazing game. And I don't remember who said it, but somebody mentioned that like some of the most beautiful games in the world in history are like games where someone cheated. It's like you produce these ridiculous ideas. So this was amazing play by our opponent. He's going to get investigated, but you know where I stand. Hopefully you found the arguments to be reasonable, and you know, chess.com will set the record straight whether he cheated or not. And like I said, if it turns out he didn't, I'll make that clear in the next speedrun game. So yeah, so it's possible he's GM. and he's smurfing, and it's possible he's not cheating. There is a chance that he's not cheating. But I feel like I really have to make that clear. Really have to make that clear, because people are very sensitive now to false accusations and GMs kind of using their authority to accuse people. So hopefully you don't feel like I'm doing that. Thank you, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the game. Nonetheless, I think it was instructive. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for hanging out. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.